everyone. Welcome to our QGIS plugin workshop. This is a workshop designed to help you understand what QGIS plugins are, how do they work, and help you get started building your own plugin. The workshop is designed to be hands-on. So we'll start with a brief overview of QGIS plugins, get a deeper understanding of what constitutes a plugin, what are the different files required, understand how do plugins work internally, and then we'll go through the mechanics of building a functional plugin. We'll start from a minimal plugin template and slowly understand what each files mean, and then improve it, and then we'll have a functional plugin at the end. If you want to follow along, this is the link to the course material. If you are watching this on a video, it will be in the video description as well. All right, so hope you got the link to the workshop. Once you go to the workshop page, you'll have everything you need to follow along. I will explain each step as we go along. The workshop's going to introduce you to the QGIS plugin architecture, and along with that, we'll go through each step on building a functional plugin. A little bit of background, I run a company called Spatial Thoughts. Spatial Thoughts is a learning platform. We teach a variety of open source geospatial technologies. QGIS is one of the main things we teach. We also teach Python, Google Earth Engine, and GDAL. One of the things we do differently is everything we do, everything we create is licensed openly. Everything is open source. Everything is licensed under a very liberal license. So you can use it. You can also take it and adapt it and teach your own class if you wish to. Everything is completely available free. We also host online instructor-led classes. Many of you would have attended our live classes. These are paid classes. This is the main source of revenue for the company, and that allows us to sustain and continue creating live materials. We also a QGIS.org certified training provider. So if you take our live class that we hold, you'll also get a certificate issued by QGIS.org from Switzerland. We also contribute back to the QGIS.org. So a part of the company's revenue goes towards supporting the QGIS open source project, and we are a sustaining member of the QGIS project. A bit about my background. I come from a traditional GIS and remote sensing background. I learned GIS on the desktop. I switched to QGIS almost 20 years back at this point. I spent most of my career at Google, and where we wanted a GIS that could scale and a lot of people could use it, we started using QGIS, and I've been using QGIS and developing using Python and QGIS for a long time. I left in 2020 to work on Spatial Thoughts. Since then, I've been teaching full time and also building a lot of open source content. All right, with that, let's get started with our workshop. What are QGIS plugins? Well, QGIS plugins allow you or any developer to add and extend the functionality of QGIS. QGIS offers a very open API. That means you can extend and change any parts of QGIS using plugins. You also think of plugins as a way to share some of the code that you've written to somebody else. Let's say you figured out how to do some interesting analysis, and you wrote some Python code in QGIS and you want to send it to somebody. How do you send it? Well, you can email them, but how do you share it with a lot of people? How do you update that? Well, plugins allow you this mechanism to distribute any customization you've done with other users. One of the key features of the plugin is the QGIS comes with a plugin manager, which allows you to install other people, plugin created by others, update them, uninstall them, and so on. And this allows this whole process of distributing and updating custom code very easy. What can QGIS plugins do? The key thing is QGIS plugins have access to all parts of QGIS. It's anything you can see, anything you can do with QGIS can be changed using plugins. You can add toolbars or buttons or menus. So if you say, I wish I had a toolbar which had these buttons where I can click and something happens. Well, once you learn how to write plugins, you can create a plugin that will add the toolbar. If you say, I wish there was a plugin that can change the color of my QGIS canvas, well, you can do that, right? Anything with the QGIS interface, you want to add, remove, change, your plugins are able to do that. You can also add new processing tools. This is one of the best ways to add new features to QGIS, where you said, I have a custom workflow or my organization needs this new analysis tool. Well, you can create one and a plugin can install that in the processing toolbox. And that means as soon as your users install the plugin, they'll have new tools in the toolbox that can interact with other tools as well. You can also call external services. That means if your company has an API or you want to use an external API into QGIS, well, because plugins are just Python code, they'll be able to call that and integrate that. This is one of the keys ways that people use plugin, where there's an external service that does something, you want that functionality in QGIS. You can build a plugin that's a bridge between QGIS and that external service. You can also change configuration. That means when people install your plugins, you are able to go and change some of the settings. But that also means when you install some plugin, they can also change your settings. And this sometimes can cause problems where, say my QGIS is broken, something is not working, I'm getting these errors. Because you may have installed a plugin which may have errors or which may have changed some settings without you realizing it. I'll also show you how you may go and reset those settings so that you can get to a factory default settings of QGIS. When you are creating plugins, you can use pure Python code. So any external service or other library that you want to use, you can use those. But to interact with QGIS, you need to use the API that QGIS provides, and that is known as PyQGIS. So the PyQGIS API allows you to interact with parts of QGIS. So when you are writing QGIS plugins, you'll have to learn how the API works. And the big part of learning about plugins is to kind of understand how this API works and gain an understanding of that. The QGIS plugins are managed by a subsystem in QGIS called the plugin manager that allows you to install, update, and manage the plugins. The key thing about plugin manager is when you start QGIS, the plugin manager will go through a special folder in your computer where all the plugins are installed, go through each folder and load all the plugins you have. Right? So that's the job of the plugin manager when QGIS is starting to load these plugins. When you have a file, when you have a folder and QGIS goes into this folder, the plugin manager goes into the folders, it expects a certain set of files to be there. If it finds those files, it says this folder is a plugin. I'm going to treat it as one and I'm going to initialize the plugin. So plugins are nothing but folders containing special files in a standard structure. And when QGIS plugin manager finds those, it'll treat them as plugins. So the plugins are loaded when QGIS starts. That means if you have a lot of plugins installed and you start QGIS, sometimes you'll find that QGIS starts very slowly. One major complaint I see from QGIS users is they will say, oh, my QGIS takes 2 minutes to start or 5 minutes to start. Well, if you have a lot of plugins, the plugin manager has to go and load all the plugins. If you want to speed up your QGIS, well, you can keep all of those plugins installed, but just disable them. I'm going to show you when we actually build the plugins. Keep all the plugins disabled, which you don't use regularly, and that means your QGIS will start very fast. To create a functional plugin, you need to create a folder and put certain set of files in that folder. We'll go through this mechanics of creating those files and building a minimal plugin that QGIS plugin manager recognizes as a valid plugin and it loads it. The first file you'll need is a file called metadata.txt. This is a file that contains the name of a plugin, who's the author, the email of the author, and some of the information about the plugin. Right? So every plugin must have a file called metadata.txt that you create. It is a standard format where you would specify different fields and they'll be loaded. If you have ever installed a QGIS plugin, you'll see when you go and install the plugin, it shows some information, the description and some GitHub repository and all of that. That comes from this particular file. Another file you need in that folder to be recognized as a valid QGIS plugin is this file called _init_.py. This file will be called by the plugin manager and say, hey, I think this folder is a plugin. Tell me where is your main class? Where is the main file of this plugin? Because the plugin can have many files. So it's going to ask this init.py and say, tell me where is your main file? And I'm going to initialize you. Okay? So we need this file. This file's purpose is to point to the main file of your plugin, which will then be initialized by the plugin manager. And then you need the main file. You can have many Python files, but you need one .py file, which contains the main code of your plugin. And you can typically name this as main.py. Somebody will name this as whatever the plugin name.py. It can be called anything, but you need at least one file which has the main code for the plugin. Inside of this main.py, once the plugin manager initializes, it's going to call certain functions. So it will define those functions inside of this main.py. So inside of this main.py, you have different methods that you need to define, which are called by the plugin manager, which does various things. The first one is the method called init, which gives you access to the QGIS interface that allows you to say, I want to change different parts of QGIS. I need access to this special variable called iFace. You'll get access to that within this init method. And then we have this init GUI method. This is where you initialize the different user interface elements that you want to add to your plugin. So if you want to add a button, menu, dialog, etc., you'll do that within the init GUI method. And then finally, there is a method called unload. That means when you uninstall the plugin or when you close QGIS, the unload method will be called to say, remove everything I've added to QGIS. So let's say you added a new menu. When people uninstall the plugin, you want to remove the menu. So remember, everything that you add within this init GUI has to be unloaded in this unload method. I find it useful wherever I say I want to add a new button to my plugin, I'll add it here and remove it. So make sure to always remember to remove stuff, and they'll make your plugin behave correctly with the QGIS plugin manager. We're going to build a plugin, which we are calling a base map loader, where we want to create a toolbar like this, where you can select different base maps and click a button to load that in your QGIS. It's a simple plugin, but it'll give you idea of how to first add a button where you click something and something happens. We'll also add some user interface, how to do a drop down. We'll learn how to do that, and then how to build a toolbar and add it to QGIS. And then add the functionality where you select the base map and it adds that base map to QGIS. This is also quite helpful where, when QGIS starts is usually a blank canvas. So you want to kind of add a reference map. I always have to go and kind of add an OpenStreetMap base map. It'll be nice to have your own toolbar that you can build and add it there. And this kind of plugin will serve as a template for you to also say, now I know how to add some user interface elements. I know how to code some functionality. I know how to create this folder that gets recognized as a plugin. And then once you understand and get used to this, you can now start customizing it and say, now I want my plugin to do something different. And you have a structure in place that you can start modifying and playing around to change it. As we start building our plugin, one of the first things I want you to do is go to this section and download the zip file. This zip file contains some of the files you need as we are creating the plugin. It also helps you when you try to create something and you get an error. It happens when you're kind of doing this for the first time that you maybe have a typo in the file name, etc. This also contains some ready-to-use files which you can just copy to the right place and you'll have a plugin. So go and download the zip file. So once you download the zip file, unzip it. This should give you a folder with logo.png. So we've given you logo. A plugin it'd be nice to have a logo for the plugin. We're going to use this one. If you don't want to use this, feel free to use any logo that you have for your company or for your organization. We have some folders containing the finished plugins that we're going to build. So you can use this as a reference, or in case you are not able to create one, you can just copy these folders to the right place and you'll have a plugin that works. Okay, let's get started. We're going to go through the 4 steps. The first step in a plugin is we're going to create a plugin, a functional plugin that QGIS plugin manager will recognize and load, and you'll be able to see that plugin in the plugin manager, and will understand what are the minimum things you require. I prefer that you start your plugin project with just a minimum number of files, and then you understand what those files are and build on top of that. And as you kind of develop a plugin and need more things, you'll be able to kind of add those later on. So let's start creating. The way we'll start creating is we'll create a folder on a computer and we'll create some files within that. To make our development process easy, we're going to first create those files on a place where you can find easily on a computer. It can be a desktop, it can be downloads, any folder on a computer where you can find easily. Once you create that folder, it has to be copied to a special location deep inside your profile, which we'll do that later on. So but first, let's create one in a place where you can find. I'm going to create one on my desktop. So I'm going to create a new folder and I'm going to name it Base Map Loader. Again, the plugin folder can be called anything. It doesn't have to be the name of a plugin. It'll be nice to name it something that you can recognize as your plugin. So just create a folder and we're going to create some files inside of that. Once we have the folder, we're going to create these 3 files. The first, I'm going to create this file called metadata.txt. So I'm going to copy this text and open my text editor. You can use any text editor that you have. If you do not have a favorite text editor, we have recommended a few free text editors that you can use. The main feature you need for a text editor is for it to create plain text files. Some of the text editors will not create plain text files. It'll create like a rich text files, or, if you cannot use like Microsoft Word as an editor because it will not create plain text files, right? Any program that can create plain text files should be okay for this purpose. I'm on a Mac, and I really like this editor called TextMate, which is a simple free editor that you can download and use. On Windows, I recommend using this text editor called Notepad++. You open a new file in your text editor and copy the contents first. This will be the metadata for your plugin. This will be displayed when people go and install your plugin. The structure of the file has a kind of standard thing where you say name of the plugin. This is the name of the plugin, the description, the version of the plugin. You have this QGIS minimum version. So what is the minimum QGIS version you need? Like, can I install this plugin on version 2.5 or something, right? Or 2.14 or something? No. So you'll require QGIS 3 or above for doing this. There's also QGIS maximum version. We're going to be upgrading to QGIS 4 soon. And in case your plugin doesn't work on QGIS 4, you can say my maximum version is 3.99, right? So you make sure that plugin is installed by users having the correct version. When you create this file, replace this with your name. So since you are creating the plugin for the first time, it'll be nice to see your name inside the QGIS plugin. So replace this with your name and your email addresses. We also say this is the one file which will be used as a logo for the plugin. Logo is not required. Like, if you do not specify a logo, QGIS will display the default logo, but you can display a logo that will be relevant and it'll make your plugin personalized. So we're going to save this file. I'm going to save this and into this folder. So I've created this folder on the desktop. So I'm going to go inside and save this file as metadata.txt. So you can see inside of this folder, I have the metadata.txt. The files need to be called exactly with this spelling. So no caps, all small letters, metadata.txt, and you can add that. One key thing to remember is there's a standard structure, standard format of this metadata.txt, where between the name and the value, there is a equal to sign, and there should not be any space. If you add a space, it will not be recognized. It will be an error. So make sure when you're updating it, you do not keep a space before or after to the equal to sign. Okay, so the first file is done. This is the metadata.txt that the plugin manager would need to display all the information. Let's create the next file. So we'll create a new file here. And you go to the section here. We need to create the main.py. This is the main file of the plugin. Let's copy paste it. And I'm going to explain each line of this shortly. I'm going to copy paste this. Make sure you paste it correctly. Make sure the first line is there. And we're going to save this file in the same folder. So we are in the basemap loader folder. And we're going to name this file main.py. Remember to name it as main.py, not main.py.txt. Some editors will add .txt at the end. If there's a .txt at the end, it will not be recognized as a plugin file. So make sure you save it as main.py. First, check the folder. You can see now I have metadata.txt that we created first, and then main.py, which is the Python file that we create. I'm going to explain the content shortly. Let's create the third file and complete the minimal plugin. I'm going to open a new file and copy the content of this third file from here. This is also a Python file, and it's going to be named init.py. So I'm going to save it. Again, come to the same folder. The name of the file is __. So there's two underscores, init __.py. Remember there are two underscores before and after. There's a .py. And now you have this third file. So at this point, my plugin folder is 3 files. This is the minimum number of files and the structure you need for the plugin manager to say, hey, this is a QGIS plugin. I'm going to treat it as one. Since we are referring to this logo, remember in the metadata.txt, we had referred to this logo.png. Let's add a logo here. In the data package that you had downloaded, we have given you one logo.png. So wherever you had unzipped it, you can copy the logo file from here. So I'm going to copy this logo here. If you have your own logo, you can copy it here, name it logo.png, because everywhere we are assuming the logo file is called logo.png. So if you have your own logo that you want to use, copy paste that particular file, but name it as logo.png, and it will be displayed in the plugin. At this point, you should have a folder somewhere you can find it on your computer, on the desktop or downloads, called Basemap Loader. It should have this 4 files, the 3 of the files we created using a text editor. First, we created metadata.txt. Feel free to replace your name and email here. So you'll see that when you install the plugin. The second one is the main.py with this content that we have supplied. And then the third one is the init.py, which just contains these few lines. So once we have these files in the folder, we need to put this folder in a special place that QGIS looks for when it starts. And this place is inside of your QGIS profile. So let me show you first where the profile is. In your QGIS, if you go to Settings, User Profiles, and click on Active Profile folder, this is we're going to open the folder, which is your QGIS profile. So go and try this out. We're going to open this folder. The default profile that all of you will have is called default. So this is a folder on your computer where all your configurations and settings are saved. And you can open this folder from Settings, User Profile, Open Active Profile folder. Inside this folder, there is a folder called Python. If you ever install a plugin, this folder will exist. If you've never installed a QGIS plugin, you'll have to create a folder called Python. Inside of that, there is a folder called Plugins. And this is where all the plugins will be installed. This is a place where when you start QGIS will say, which profile are you using? Inside, it'll go inside the profile folder, go to this place and start loading each plugin one by one. So it's going to come to each folder and say, hey, does this folder have all the required files? Does it have init.py? Does it have metadata.txt? And does it have the main file? If it does have all these files, it's going to treat this folder as a plugin and do all the stuff that it needs to initialize the plugin. So plugins are nothing but folders with some special files in a special place. Okay? And you can see these are all the plugins I've installed in my computer. Now, I mentioned that when you start QGIS, all of those plugins will be initialized. So if you do not want all of them to initialize and your QGIS take forever to start, you can go to your plugin manager and disable all the plugins you don't need. So let's say if I don't use this plugin regularly, so I've installed it, but I've kept it disabled. And that means that folder will not be looked at when QGIS start. Whenever I want to use it, I can just come here, enable that, and it'll be enabled. This is a great way to speed up your QGIS start point. So if you're finding that your QGIS takes a long time to start, please come here and disable all the plugins. I keep everything except a few plugins I use regularly disabled, and I can always go and enable that. Also, profiles are something where all your settings are stored. And that means if you install a plugin which had changed your settings or it's giving error, and you start QGIS and it's not behaving correctly, the easiest way to fix is to go to Settings, User Profile, and say, create a new profile. When you create a new profile, it'll start QGIS again with a blank profile. That means as if it has just been reset to factory defaults. No plugins, no configuration changes. This usually fixes 99% of your problems. If you think QGIS is misbehaving, or if your colleague or somebody says, my QGIS is not doing something right, first debugging step is to create a new profile. You can also have multiple profiles that you can switch between. Many people have one profile for editing where they have multiple other plugins and toolbars, one profile for map creation, one profile for plugin creation, and so on. Right? So you can have multiple profiles and you can start QGIS in different profiles. So now if we put our plugin folder here that we created, QGIS will load this when it starts and it will be recognized as a plugin. So let's try that. So I'm going to go to the desktop place or any place where I've created this Basemap Loader folder. I'm going to copy it, or even better, just move it. I'm going to just move it to this folder. So I've now taken the code with the 4 files that we have created from a place that you know, like a desktop or downloads, and moved it over to this special plugin folder inside of your profile. And now I'm going to restart QGIS. So I'm going to turn off QGIS and start it again. And as QGIS is starting, the QGIS will initialize this. The plugin manager will say, now I'm going to go through each folder in this plugin and I'm going to initialize this. And it's going to find the newly created folder. And if it's got right amount of files, it's going to say, I'm going to initialize this as well. If it was initialized correctly, you can go to your plugin manager and you'll find this base map loader plugin that we just created, and you can enable that. When you go to this base map loader folder, it should show you as the author that if you're updated the metadata.txt, and now you have this plugin that was installed just by copying over the folder. And when we turn it on in your main QGIS window, you'll see this icon. This is the logo that we have added. You'll find this in the plugin toolbar, and if you click on it, it should just say hello from plugin. This shows that the plugin was installed correctly. The QGIS plugin manager recognized this as a plugin and added this button, where in the code, we have just coded just one message, which says when somebody clicks this plugin button, it's going to display hello from plugin. If you do not see this button here, you may have to enable the plugin toolbar. So anywhere on the toolbar, you can right click and make sure you have turned on the plugin toolbar. The button will go in the plugin toolbar. So if you want to replicate this, make sure you have this folder with 4 files. Open the plugin folder. So you have to go to your QGIS default profile or the active profile, find the folder called Python plugins and copy your folder there. Best to move it there so you don't accidentally keep editing the folder on the desktop, because you need to now update this folder inside of this plugin folder for it to be reloaded and add new functionality. You have to restart QGIS. After that, you have to go to the plugin manager and enable the newly created plugin. And after that, you should see an icon in your plugins toolbar. And when you click on it, it should display the hello from plugin message. Let's go through the code and understand what the plugin did. Metadata.txt is clear. This is the information that gets displayed in the plugin manager when you go to enable, disable, or install the plugin. When the plugin manager starts, it's going to call this file init.py, and this file should have a reference to your main class of the plugin. Remember, the main file is called main.py. So in this file, we just say from the main file, we are loading this class. So this is the name of the class of the plugin. This can be called anything. Typically, you name it as the plugin name class. So our plugin is called base map loader. So I've named it as base map loader plugin class. It can be called anything. Whatever it is called here, you have to reference this and say, please import this class and initialize it. So this is the initialization part. When the plugin manager starts a plugin, it's going to give you the reference to iFace. iFace is a special variable in PyQGIS API, which will give you access to the QGIS interface. The iFace variable is used to add any interface elements like buttons, toolbars, menus, etc. So this is going to say, here's iFace, please go and initialize a plugin. So it's going to start the plugin with iFace. Inside of our main plugin class, it'll be initialized with the iFace variable. We're going to just save the reference to iFace. Since it's a Python class, we're going to refer to each variable using the self keyword. The self keyword in Python refers to the current instance of the plugin. That means when the class is initialized, self always refers to the plugin that has been running. So self is always the reference to the current instance of the class. So we say whatever plugin we need iFace. So we're going to save it as self.iface. Remember, the second method we need is init GUI. So all the user interface stuff we're going to add. Here, we're going to just add one button. So since we want to add a button, we're going to create a button. Now, all the user interface in QGIS comes from this toolkit called Qt. Qt is a user interface framework that QGIS uses, and you can use the Qt functions to create the user interface. In Qt, each menu item or button is called an action. So we say create a new Q action with this icon, the logo.png that we supplied, name it load.basemap, and keep it as the parent will be main window. So keep it as a children of main window. And then we're going to say add toolbar icon. So this is the function provided by the iFace QGIS user interface class, where it says using iFace, we're going to add this toolbar button. So this line adds this button to the plugin toolbar. And we say, once you click the button, something should happen. So here we have coded this where we say when the action is triggered. So when you click the button and the action is triggered, call this function called self.run. And this is a function we have defined where you click the button, this function will be called. And right now it just displays this message, hello from plugin. We're going to update here to make the function, the plugin useful. Right now, we just have a button that does something when you click on it. Also, we need this unload method. That means we added this new toolbar icon to the toolbar. That means when you uninstall the plugin or when QGIS closes, you have to remove the toolbar icon. Now we move on to the next step. We're going to work on the next section where we'll now update some of the files that we created to make the plugin actually do something useful. We're going to update some of the files with new code. So remember the main.py that we had, we're going to change the code. Now, this file is the one that you copy to your plugin folder. So in your text editor, make sure you close all the files that were previously created. If you keep updating those files, they will not change your plugin because that files are on your desktop or downloads. QGIS doesn't recognize that as the plugin folder. So now you need to update the files that are in your plugin folder. So remember, this was a profile folder. If you lost that folder or closed it, go back to the profile folder. Inside of that, the plugin should be inside the Python's plugin folder and find this base map loader folder. And here are the files which are now being used in QGIS. So we're going to open this main.py file in the text editor. So I'm going to go and open this. And this is the file that exists. We're going to replace the content with the new content, which adds some functionality. So I'm going to come to the section 2 here, take the main.py file, copy the whole content, and replace the whole thing, and save it. We're going to go through and understand what this does, but for now, let's just see if the updated plugin works. So copy this content from section 2 here. We're going to copy this and update the main.py here. When I come back to QGIS, I click this button, nothing updates. It's still saying hello.plugin. The reason is the plugin is already loaded. There's a new instance of the plugin. There's the instance of the plugin that was created, and QGIS uses that instance. To now see the updates, we need to reload the plugin so that we can see the update. One way to do this is to restart QGIS. Now, restarting QGIS can become very painful, right? Every time you make a change, you have to restart QGIS to see the changes. So to make this process easier, there is a plugin that will make this whole workflow easier. So let's go and install one more plugin called Plugin Reloader that allows you to reload plugins easily. So let's go to the plugin manager and search for this plugin called Plugin Reloader. This is going to be your best friend when you do any kind of plugin development, because instead of every time restarting QGIS when you update plugins, you can just click one button and this plugin will go and reload the plugin. So go and install this plugin. I'm going to enable that. This is going to add a new toolbar in your plugin toolbar. From here, you can go and load the plugin and choose the base map loader. Saying that I want to now go and reload the base map loader plugin. And when you click OK, the plugin is going to get reloaded. And now when you click this button, it's going to display a base map. Okay, so instead of just displaying the message hello from plugin, we actually made the plugin load a base map to your QGIS. So here's the plugin updation workflow. We're going to use this helper plugin called Plugin Reloader, which allows you to reload the content of the plugin easily without having to restart QGIS. We're going to go and from the toolbar, going to pick this plugin to reload, select base map reloader, click reload, and then you'll have the button there. Click the button and it should load the OpenStreetMap base map here. You should be able to now click this and it's going to load a layer. Let's understand the code a little bit. Here we have the same class. So we still need all those three methods inside of this. So we have the init method, which loads the reference to iFace. We have the init GUI, which we are now adding this button. So I'm not going to change that. So everything remains the same. And we have coded that when you click the button, you should call this self.run. What we updated in this step was this run method, where we say, now when you click the run method, you should load this OpenStreetMap base map. This base map layer is an XYZ tile layer. So there is a web server where they have created these tiles where they've rendered OpenStreetMap in a particular style. And then as you zoom in, it's going to load newer tiles. And the way you specify where the tiles are is the URL and then Z, X, and Y. So these are called XYZ tile layers. There are many such services. Many people provide those XYZ tiles, and they'll be able to serve those tiles when you have a URL like this. There's some configuration here. and max of the zoom levels. And the CRS, all of the web tile layers will be in this CRS. This is the Google Web Mercator CRS. And almost all of the XYZ tiles will be in this format. So we just say create a URI saying that this is the URL, this is the Zmax, Zmin, and the CRS, and create a new QGIS layer. So this is the PyQGIS API code to create a new XYZ layer where you say for this URL, use the WMS provider. There are different providers in QGIS. There's a vector provider, which is OGR. There's a raster provider, which is GDAR. And this is a tile provider, which understands different kind of tile structure. And it uses that to understand how to load these tiles. And we're going to load this layer as OpenStreetMap. Now, all of these things are PyQGIS API. And that means when you're building your own plugin, you have to replace this with whatever you want to do and the equivalent PyQGIS code. Now that you understand the structure, it'll be easier to now go find a reference and say, I want to load a vector layer using my plugin. You can go and search how to load a vector layer using PyQGIS API, or ask an AI assistant, how do I load a vector layer using PyQGIS API? Get some code snippet, update it, put it here, and then when you click the button and this run method is called, you load a vector layer, right? So you can now incrementally improve this and add functionality to your plugin. Let's improve on a plugin. Right now, our user interface consists of just a button where you have only one button. You don't have control over which layer gets loaded. Maybe you want to add a label, a toolbar, a dropdown, a dialog. How do you create those kind of interfaces? So let's see how we can update our plugin to add some user interface. QGIS uses this framework for Qt. This is an open source framework for creating user interface. The great thing about Qt is it's cross-platform. That means you write one code, whatever code you write, and say, I want a dialog box. And Qt will create the dialog box for you. If that code is run on a Mac, that window will look like a Mac. If that code is run on Windows, that window will look like Windows. If it's run on iOS, it'll look like an iPhone app. If it's run on Android, it'll look like an Android window, right? So it runs cross-platform, Windows, Linux, Mac, iOS, Android. That means you code once and Qt will translate this on platform-appropriate user interface. And QGIS itself is written using Qt. That means QGIS also runs on different platforms using the same code. There's no special code for it to say, if it's Mac, create this kind of window, or if it's Linux, do this. Qt takes care of that. So when you want to create user interface, we can use this Qt and add the user interface. So if you want to add any dialog boxes, buttons, menus, etc., Qt is the way to do. So you can search how to create a dialog box using Qt. And since we are using Qt from Python, you can search how to add a menu using PyQt, because Qt is also C++, but we are using Qt via Python. That is called PyQt. Another way to add user interface is to create a new processing algorithm. In QGIS, there's a processing toolbox, and there is tools inside which have this own interface. And if you want a little more complex interface, if you are building tools for doing data processing, this is the preferred method where you don't create your own dialog boxes, you don't create your own interface, you just use the QGIS processing API to create those for you. And this is very, very simple, where you say, I want a layer selector. You just have to specify one line of code, use the processing API and add a layer selector. And QGIS will take care of making sure it appears exactly how processing interface works. So this is the preferred way to add user interface if you're building processing tools. Most of your needs will be sufficed by this tool. If you're doing any kind of analytic tools, please use this. This will make your job much easier. You don't have to manage any user interface part. You'll get a tool that looks very polished, sophisticated, and gets all the features. So highly recommended for doing this. If you want something small like a toolbar or a button or a new menu item, please use Qt API directly to do this. The third option is, let's say you say, I want something really fancy. I want something really custom that doesn't look like a processing algorithm, doesn't look like a simple dialog box. You can build one using Qt. So you can design your own custom dialog boxes. There is a program called Qt Creator, which you can drag and drop and create an interface. I do not recommend this at all, because this requires very advanced knowledge to create something functional. And again, you won't be able to get it as something as good as the processing algorithms. So for any analytical tools, please use this. For other parts of your plugin where you need this, use this. Only for plugins which do not fit within this tool, you can create your custom dialog boxes. I have step-by-step instructions. Again, if you go to this thing, there's a big warning that do not use this. Use this only when it's absolutely required, right? So please do this. Most of the requirement can be done using this. Okay, let's go and implement this. Let's add this toolbar with a drop down and where you can select not just the OpenStreetMap base layer, but other base map layers and load that. So now we're going to go to section 3. We're going to update this main.py. I'm going to share, copy this code from here. I'm going to come back to the main.py. I'm going to replace this, save it. We're going to understand this in shortly, but let's go and see if our interface changes. So we're going to go back to QGIS, use the plugin reloader, click here. The icon will disappear from here, and you should see a new toolbar that appears in QGIS. This toolbar is the one that we created using our plugin. So when you reload the plugin, it's going to create this toolbar and add it here. It becomes like a QGIS toolbar. So you can see if you right click on it, it's going to now say there is a base map selected toolbar. So it becomes part of your toolbar list here, which you can arrange, rearrange, turn off, etc. And you have a drop down here. So instead of just having this OpenStreetMap as an option for base map, you can use other base maps. We have listed 4 open access base maps that is available here. So you can try one of them. Let's try this CartoDB dark matter and click this button. And it's going to now load a dark theme base map from CartoDB. And so we change our plugin to now allow people to use multiple base maps and load that. Okay, let's go through and see what was the change in the code. First, we created this dictionary of base maps that we want to add. So this is the name of the layer and then the URL of the base map. So we now have these 4 URLs. There are many services. If you just search XYZ tile services, you'll find some URL. If you want to add those to your map, you can just add those here, add one more item in the dictionary, and you'll be added to your plugin here. One pro tip is many times you want to create your own tile service. Let's say you have your custom map and you want to create such tile services that you can your clients can load. The QGIS toolbox comes with a tool called Generate XYZ Tiles. That means you create your map here in QGIS, run this tool, it'll create a directory full of those tiles, which you can upload to a web server, and you'll get a web tile like this. And a lot of people use this to say, I have this really large image, or I have this complex map I've created. I want to render it on a web or allow people to load it as base map. You can create the built-in tools to create those XYZ tiles. So we do this, and now we have our interface is different. Remember in the previous one, we had only one button, but now we have 3 elements. We have a toolbar, we have a label, we have a dropdown, along with the button that we already had. So we have changed this init GUI method here. First, we create a new toolbar, and we add the button that was previously added. We create a label. So there's a QLabel method that allows you to create a label. We create a dropdown menu. There's a Q combo box, which is a Qt method to create a drop-down menu. We add all our 4 base map items to the combo box. And then we say from all the toolbar, we add a label, we add a drop-down, and we add a button. And finally, we add a button and say, when the button is clicked, read whatever is loaded into the drop-down menu and load the map. So here is the interface change. And since we created a lot of the item, we also want to remove this. So right now it's say, whenever plugin is unloaded, just delete the whole toolbar. And that means any widget that had the toolbar as a parent will also get deleted. So here you can see this drop-down menu has parent as the toolbar. That means when toolbar goes away, this also goes away. So when we have the parent-child relationship, we can just go and delete the parent, and all the child elements will also get deleted. There's a really amazing resource in the main QGIS documentation called PyQGIS Developer Cookbook. If you have a question how to do something using Python within QGIS, this is the page to come and find some reference. For example, how do I go and load a shapefile? Come here and say, I want to load a vector layer. Well, it has got all the code available saying you specify the path to the shapefile, create a QGIS vector layer, and then load it. Right? So you replace your code for loading a web layer with this, and you can load a particular shapefile. Okay, let's say you have this plugin you created, and you are very excited, and say you want to share it with your colleague, you want to send it to your clients. How do you share your plugin with other users? Let's see some of the methods. Once your plugin is ready, And remember, plugin is just a folder with special files in a special place. So now if you have a folder and you want it to be a plugin, you can send that folder over to somebody, they can put it in a special place and it becomes a plugin. There are many ways to make it easy. The first and the simplest way is you can take the folder that you created, zip it up and send the zip file to somebody. So you say, send it to your colleague and say, hey, here's a new plugin I created, here's a zip file, please go and install that. Okay, so zipping the file is easy. Once you share the zip file, the plugin manager gives you an easy way to install that. Let's go back to the folder. So let's say this is the folder that has a plugin and I want to share it with somebody. So I would come and just zip it up. So I'll just create a zip file. And now I have a zip file, which is the plugin folder. I want to put it in a special place. But again, to explain that to your users that, oh, unzip it, copy it over the profile is a very hard thing. So instead, what you do is you just say, I'm going to email this file to a colleague or put it in a shared drive. Your colleagues can download this. They come to QGIS, go to Plugin Manager, and there's a section here, install from zip. So when you share your zip file with your colleague, they can download it and then say, go to Plugin Manager, install from zip, browse to the zip file, which we just created. And when they browse and click this button, it's going to get copied over to the right place and it's going to be activated as a plugin. If you've been using QGIS for a while, you may not have noticed that this option exists, right? This has been there forever, but then it's a way to easily share zip files with somebody, then install a plugin with that. And many times, if you hire a QGIS developer, they would just send a zip file to you, and this is how you can install that. And if you're a QGIS developer and you have building stuff for a client, just send them zip file, teach them how to install this once, and then they'll be able to use that. Zip files are the best way to share plugins privately. So if your colleagues, internal plugins are the best way, just put it in a shared drive. I know many companies who have plugins internally where they put it on a shared file, and whoever needs a plugin, go and download that and install that using zip. The downside of this is, let's say you've added some new functionality. There's no automated way to push that update to your users. You have to again email them or tell them that please go and download the new version, install this again. So updates have to be manual. That's a downside. Another option is you can upload the plugin to the QGIS official plugin repository, and that will be available to all QGIS users. It will be managed by the plugin manager. That's great, but it is recommended only for public plugins. Do not upload a plugin you develop for your company to this repository because it's not relevant to other people. Right? So if you have a plugin that is suitable for general public, you can upload that. Since this will be accessible to all QGIS users, they'll be reviewed by the QGIS team for security flaws, for malware, etc. So there'll be a review process. They'll review the plugin. If it's suitable, then they'll approve it to be added to the QGIS repository. The great thing about this is if you have a plugin in the official repository and there's an update available, the users will get a notification saying that there's a new version of the plugin. They can just click that and they'll get a new plugin. So this update process is seamless, but is only recommended for public plugins. If you have a plugin that has got some features specific to your company, the way to kind of also share it as a public plugin is you develop a plugin keeping generic thing in mind. So let's say you develop a plugin where you can connect to a PostGIS server within your company. Now that is very specific to your company. But if you change the plugin to say, you install the plugin and here is a way to input the URL password of the PostGIS database and connect to that. Now that is useful to everybody, right? Now anybody can install the plugin and input the credentials of the PostGIS database, and they can access the database through the plugin. So if you can make the plugin generic enough, that is both useful for your company, your client, or public, then it's suitable for uploading to the public repository. The third option is useful when you start having more users. So if you have, let's say, 30 users, 40 users of a plugin, and managing updates becomes painful, or if you are a developer and you have like 10, 15, 20 clients and everybody, you are emailing zip files to everybody, instead of that, you can set up your own plugin repository. So you say my plugins are private, I cannot upload to the official public repository, but I want to create my own repository. This repository can contain multiple zip files, multiple plugins, and people can install that. Let's see how that works. In the settings, we have an option to say, add a new repository. So by default, the public repository is the only one that is available to users. If users want to access your private repository, they can click this button and you give them the URL. This is where I've hosted my repository. You can also make it private, so you can have a username, password, etc. And once they install it and update, refresh it, the plugin will appear here. So they can now search for a plugin and they'll also search for the private repository they have, and they can install plugin from that. So this is the best way to distribute a plugin to your clients, where you can have authentication. You can also set up something that is not in the public repository, but they also get the benefit of automated updates. So as you scale up your plugin creation business, if you have more clients or if you have a lot of internal users, you can set this up. How do you set up this repository? How do you set up this repository? Well, it can be as simple as a folder in a cloud bucket. So you can have a Google Cloud Storage or S3 bucket, and you can drop some zip files, and that can be used as a plugin repository. So it can be very simple. Any web server or any cloud repository can act as a plugin repository. Along with the zip files of plugin, you also need one more XML file which describes what plugins are there. So when you want to point people to, you point to this XML file on a web server or in a cloud bucket that lists all the plugins you have. And then it becomes your private repository. I've linked to the tutorial here, which explains the process of creating a custom repository. So recommendation for sharing, well, for 5-10 users, this is the easiest way. Just email zip files or share on a private repository. As you scale up your users, consider setting up your own repository. This makes updates much easier, and your job for managing multiple plugins are also much easier. And then finally, if you build a plugin that is useful for general public, you can upload it to the plugin repository. We are done with the whole workflow. We learned what constitutes a plugin. We understood the requirements of different files. We created a minimal plugin. We added some functionality. We added some user interface. And finally, we learned what are the different options you have for packaging and sharing the plugin. Before we move on further, let's do a quiz. If you want to test your knowledge about QGIS plugins, go and try out this quiz. Before we go, I want to share the resources. If you like this workflow of plugin development, you learned it, and you now know the mechanics of building a plugin, but now to add functionality, you need to learn a little bit more. We recommend this course. We have a full course on PyQGIS development. Again, as with everything else, our course is open access. Anybody can use this material. If you're motivated, you can always complete this as a self-study and learn the QGIS development. It also comes with videos that you can watch and do this. So if you're interested in continuing a journey and become proficient at plugin creation, I recommend using this material as a reference and learning the full PyQGIS API so you can build plugins that are fully functional.